What's going on, everybody? This is Mortym, and I wanted to share with you guys a build I've kind of been working on. I'm calling it the Venom Claw as of right now. So, with the Dark Brotherhood, they changed a bunch of the Dragonknight skills to poison damage instead of the fire damage they were doing, specifically Venomous Claw and Noxious Breath. I believe there are one or two others they changed as well, but those are the main two. And those are the main two we're focusing on, as a matter of fact. So, I have been playing with dual wield and a bow, but we'll get to that in a second, and first we're going to go over the champion points I'm using. So, starting off in the mage, we're mostly going to be in the ritual, and we're going to be split between Mighty and Thaumaturge. Thaumaturge increases our dots, which is going to be all that poison damage and a few bleeds, and then Mighty is our physical and poison damage just raw, so both of those are useful. For the warrior constellations, we're mostly in spell shield because I am wearing heavy armor, so hardy wasn't quite as important to me. But eventually, once we get this to 100, we are going to switch over and start putting points into hardy. So those are the only two I'm really focused on in those constellations. For the thief constellations, we are worried about warlord, and that's pretty much it. It's just reducing all of the stamina so we have as much resource as possible. This guy is my crafter, so I also have the Plentiful Harvest perk, but that's a totally different thing. So, with the champion points out of the way, before we get into skills, let's talk about gear real fast. I am using heavy armor, and a lot of people don't like that as a stamina DPS, but with the recent change to the Dark Brotherhood, they changed the heavy armor to where when you have 5 pieces or more, every time you get hit, you start stacking weapon damage. So it is actually more of an option than it was. Factually, I believe medium's still going to get you a bit more DPS just because it gives you a raw increase. But because I'm trying to do Maelstrom with this build, I wanted the extra defense, and we still get some weapon damage from it now. So it's a little more doable, and it's just the way I like to play. But feel free to use medium if that's your thing. Now, mostly we're using Hunding's Rage for obvious reasons. Again, all that extra weapon damage, the criticals. And on top of that, we are using Ashen Grip. That's mostly just because I like the first 4 that I can get, and with stacking everything, I can get the 4-piece set bonus from that. And that's just for the extra health, weapon damage, and the critical. It's just those, because I'm not after that 5-piece, Ashen Grip is just the one I like to use. It's the one I recommend, honestly, from the ones I've seen. This is the one that fits this build the best, in my opinion, at least. So, jewelry I'm not too worried about because I don't have basically enough gold to really care about that stuff. Damage-wise, for our dual wield, we're going to use 2 axes, and that is specifically, because 2 axes gets us, where is it at? The bleed from Twin and Blade, which, because we're adding all those dots, we get extra damage. As you can see, we're doing 8,000 over 6. I believe without that perk, it was like 6,000 as a base. So we're going to use Axe to proc that bleed and get more damage over time going. Now, for the bow, we're just using a regular old bow. Nothing special. I will say, trait-wise for all this stuff, I would have preferred Divines, but I didn't really care to go just remake all of my armor. I just didn't have the resources to do that. But trait-wise, I would prefer Divines, and that is simply because we're using the Warrior Mundus Stone, which is increasing our weapon damage, and with Divines, we could just stack an insane amount of weapon damage because the Divine trait gives you more effect from your Mundus Stone, so it would increase our weapon damage even further than it already is. I believe at base it's 3.5, but it goes up, and then so from there it would stack just really well. So that's what I would use ideally, but again, I didn't want to go through all of these and just remake all of them because, as you can see, high level mats are insane. So it would take me a day's worth of farming to change that. So let's talk skills. So for dual wield, I started with the dual wield Blood Craze, which is the morph version of, I believe it's Twin Strike, something like that. So that's going to give us some health as we bleed, which applies the dot, of course. Second, we're using Noxious Breath, which is the Dragonknight's frontal cone. So not only does that apply a poison dot, but it also applies major fracture, which reduces physical resistance, which is awesome for all of our ridiculous amounts of weapon damage. For our third one, we're going to be using Evil Hunter. It's nothing special, I just want that major savagery weapon crit off of it. That's the main reason that's on there. For our fourth ability, we are looking at the dual wield Hidden Blade. That's actually not the morph version, because I've just kind of started working on this, so I didn't have the morph version yet. But it's really good. We're actually going to open with this in most cases, because when we hit it, the damage isn't anything special, but it does grant us major brutality, increasing our weapon damage by 20% for 20 seconds. And with all the weapon damage stacking we're doing, that's a great way to go. For our last one, we're going to be using Venomous Claw, which is the other poison dot we obtained with the change. And it's just a crazy dot because it increases damage by 12% every 2 seconds it's on. Plus, it just does an insane amount of damage over time by itself. Plus, with all those champion points, it just does crazy damage. So as I'm trying to go through Maelstrom Arena, I've been using Dawnbreaker of Smiting because, again, crazy dot and it stuns. However, when I am not in Maelstrom Arena, I actually prefer Take Flight just because this build doesn't really have a lot of ground coverage. And when I'm in Maelstrom, I don't really need ground coverage as much. So I use Dawnbreaker of Smiting, but just out in the normal everyday PvE, I definitely use Take Flight in place of that. So, switching over to our bow side, we're going to be using Endless Hail just for a little bit of AoE because most of this is all single target except for Noxious Breath. We can hit a bit of a cone there. And then we apply the Endless Hail on top of that, basically right where we are, and we can get a decent amount of AoE going. From there, we move on to Snipe. This is mostly a choice for Maelstrom Arena. You could probably change this out with other skills if you wanted to, if you're not doing Maelstrom. I use this in Maelstrom, again, unmorphed version, by the way, because there are certain stages, like stage 3, where you have to hit those stranglers that are on the other side, and you're kind of trapped on an island sometimes, and Snipe just helps me take care of them. Now, from there, we're going on to Igneous Shield in the Earth and Heart tree. This serves a lot of purposes. This is a very robust skill, and other than granting us a shield and absorbing damage, of course, it also, the Igneous Shield version gives you Major Mending, which increases healing done by 25%, which applies from all of our bleeds, Blood Craze specifically, and then also Resolving Vigor in the Alliance War Assault option, which uses stamina to heal you. So, Igneous Shield will give us more healing from Resolving Vigor, as well as proccing the class passive Helping Hands, I believe it is, yeah, which gives us our stamina, which helps a lot in Maelstrom where you have to manage your own resources. And then lastly, just to deal with ranged attackers, we pick up Dragonfire Scale, which is just returning damage and not getting hit in the face with projectiles. And then we're using Standard of Might for this just because it's great AoE and it's a dot passive. Alternatively, you could of course use the, where is it at? The Mages Guild Ice Comment, but the reason I'm not using this is because that's cold damage and stuff, so it doesn't really stack with any of our champion points, where while this is a dot, and so is that of course, but because it's not cold damage specifically, we get that extra flame damage, plus we get all the extra just because it's the Standard of Might, increases your damage by 20%, damage dealt. So that's the reason we went with that. I would tell you if you want to change that out, go crazy. Personally, that's the one I find to be the most useful, however. So, from there, we're going to... I'm just going to show you a quick fight in Maelstrom Arena as a boss. So, I'm recording this part in time, but the next part with the boss fight, I did not, simply because I cannot focus on doing Maelstrom stuff and talking at the same time. I just can't, not well, anyway. So, I'm going to show you guys that and kind of walk you through it as we're going. But other than that, I think that's pretty much going to wrap it up. I would tell you real quick before we get to that part that what I like to do normally is... depending on the situation, I'll either open up with Endless Hail, Snipe, or Hidden Blade. If I'm already on top of them, I'm probably just going to start with Hidden Blade to hit you know, get that major brutality immediately, and then just start applying all of my dots as much as I can. Now, in PvE, I honestly, if I'm not healing, I don't really use this much, or if I'm not trying to basically stop getting hit in the face. But just out in regular old PvE, it's pretty easy because I can just run up to stuff. In PvP, you're going to be using this a little more often, but I'll get to that some other time. So, I just kind of wanted to show you guys the build I'm working on. We're going to go jump over to that other fight now in Maelstrom, and I'm going to talk about that. Okay, guys, so like I said, I'm not actually recording this part in time with the video. I'm just talking about it. So if you don't know, this is stage 4 of the Maelstrom Arena. This is the final fight with a Control Guardian. So you want to stay under him for the most part. As you can see, I started with Hidden Blade, and then I started just applying my dots like crazy. So this first part is really easy because, you know, he's just walking and you stand under him and that's it. If you can hit the Clockwork Sentries, I've found it very hard to do enough damage to the Control Guardian, as well as actually kill these Clockwork Sentries until he stops. So the way the Control Guardian works, and I don't do a very good job of it at the start here, but you actually kind of want to stand almost under his feet, but just not close enough to get hit by that little flaming ring under him. Because if you don't stand close enough, he starts throwing those fireballs at you, and it's just really hard to get away from those. As you can see, I almost died right there. That was pretty great. So use the power-ups. Those are really helpful. But other than that, we're basically just going to dot him down and stay under him specifically. Now, I would say don't even worry about the ads too much until he stops, because until he stops, you're basically just wasting your time. I mean, hit him with a dot if you can, but I wouldn't worry about him too much. But as I said, as you can see right here, if you stay close enough, he doesn't throw those volleys. You just kind of have to make sure you're not overwhelmed by ads. So, because we were standing in our standard of might, those guys all went down pretty quickly. We managed to kill all of the mods. So, we just reapply all of our dots as he starts walking. And as you can see, the dots pretty much do most of the work with all of our dot stacking. I mean, he's down pretty far already, and we're not even really focusing on him that much. So, like I said, just kind of focus on the mobs when he stops. Hidden Blade, Blood Craze, pop the Endless Hail when you can, but it's not super important, just unless you're surrounded by a lot of easy mobs or you're in kind of a dungeon situation. That would be a little different. But for the most part, we're going to be using Vigor several times to heal, and Igneous Shield. That's your main source of healing as you're going through this. As you can see, I take a lot of damage several times, but that heals so much I managed to get through it, as long as I'm, you know, not standing in the red, obviously. But yeah, see, down he goes. Those dots do it all, guys. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please subscribe. Tell me what you think of the build. See you next time.